not call conspiracy everything this people calls a conspiracy. Do not fear what they fear, and do not dread it.
Do you feel it in the air? Everything is changing, a world wasted by fear.
It's called a neuralizer. It's a gift from some friends from out of town. This red eye here will isolate the electronic impulses in your brains, more specifically the ones for memory.
Who are you? Really?
Really? I am just a figment of your imagination.
So, what to do with memory? In medicine, we think of memory as a potentially harmful thing when people present with post-traumatic stress disorder. They can't stop thinking about the thing that's creating emotional distress. It's a very active development in the field to figure out, can we erase memory? Can we modify memory? Can we change memory? The short answer is yes. Several years ago, with the PKM-zeta data out of Duke University, this was the first time that anyone had ever demonstrated that if you wash an area of the brain called the hippocampus, it's an area of our brain that's crucial for forming short memories, spatial memories, and then facilitating the transfer from a short-term memory to something that's more permanent and stable over time, that he could train the mice to run the maze, document the number of trials and errors, and then flood their hippocampus or expose it to this, and the memory would be completely gone. Meaning when the rats or the mice had to learn it over again, it was the same number of learning trials. And there was no trace of the memory left. Now the good news for us when we study rats and mice is we put electrodes and cannulae into their brain and can directly affect that area of the brain. If you wanted to poke your own hippocampus, you'd have to stick your finger through your eye and go right back in there. Sounds impossible to get to. Not if you program a cell to go there. Not if you program a cell to go there. So if you decide you wanted to program something that would selectively release PKM-zeta after your meeting with someone, they probably would have no memory of it. That's what's happening in the rats. Right? So the technical challenge right now is, how do we get a cell in there to do that in a human? I can assure you they're working on that in non-human primates right now. How many, what's the point specificity? Can we get it in there close enough to the hippocampus? Will those cells start reproducing in the next day, make enough of that stuff to wipe out a memory? So this is in 2009 using light. They've transferred memory. You can turn things on and off using light in animals to activate the hippocampus, turn memory on and off. And so where are we with humans in creating false memories, giving them memories that they've never had? We've come a long way. My colleague is Beth Loftus, and this was her early work. It was called Lost in a Mall. And what she did is she asked a person to be in the study. You could be in her study if you had a sibling that was at least 5 years older than you. And she'd say, we're interested in your memory from when you were a kid. I've asked your older sibling, your older brother or sister, to give me 4 stories about you, and I want to know how much you remember. What people didn't know is that there were 4 different stories. One of them was fake, and she wanted to see how long it would take for them to adopt a false memory. The quick answer is, after 2 interview sessions, 30% of the subjects believed that they remembered the person who'd found them when they were lost at a mall, and actually argued with the researcher about whether or not the memory was true or not. And that's how I met her, and we decided to get together and run up to Brunswick to SEER School and try a memory experiment. This was our design. If you're not familiar with SEER, there's a classroom phase, there's an experiential phase. We were interested in sampling people when they were in isolation, when they were returning their gear, and at the end. And we tried a couple of different techniques. Group 1, there's no misinformation. We simply want to sample accuracy of human memory for their experience. And we told them at the beginning of SEER, we want you to be the best little human collector possible. We are going to quiz you about your memory Don't let us trick you. We want to know what you remember. Group 2, we told them the same thing, but we lied. When they took their questionnaire at the end, we incorporated several techniques from false memory techniques, which are a little bit of leading questions to see whether or not we could create false memories. In the third group, we exposed them to an erroneous photograph of their interrogator. And in group 4, we used a video. So here's what we did. By exposing them to a photograph after they had been interrogated and placed in isolation stress, it could change them from this guy to this guy 48 hours later on who they would identify in the lineup. Their level of confidence was an 8 out of 10, that was the person they had met. We found out we could make them believe that there were guns, that there were knives, that there were caches of weapons, simply by altering the phrasing of a question or inserting something into a video. I'll give you an example. If we said, did your interrogator wear a weapon? If so, please describe it. We only got about a 2% endorsement of the presence of a weapon in the interrogation phase. If we said, when you were being interrogated by your interrogator and the guy with the weapon interrupted the interrogation, what did they argue about? We didn't care what the answer was. We'd ask another question. They'd say, describe the weapon worn by your interrogator. It jumped to 30%, would tell us the type of firearm that they had seen in the interrogation booth, which is a security violation, right? There weren't any. We got to record them. But with one question, we could do that. When you sample with a few more, you can actually increase the sample. So when we increased the stress at SEER, we found that instead of a 30% rate overall, we could create false memories in nearly everyone. That was in 900 people. So Beth and I were talking about that. We said, well, you can change memory. We know that. It's a way of understanding maybe why and how people have recovered memories of abuse that never happened. That's what her work has mainly been about. So she decided to do a study called Licked by Pluto. She decided she couldn't make Mickey Mouse a sex offender, but in her lab they thought Pluto was fair game. The short story is they were exposed to some misinformation about a man who had dressed in the Pluto outfit at Disney, and he'd been inappropriately rubbing his large fabric tongue on children, pleasurably and not pleasurably. There were two different conditions, then there was a neutral condition. If people adopted the false memory and their memory was for something negative, they did not want to buy the Pluto toy, right? When they went down their list, what they would not buy. She's done it with food. That was from her series with Alan Alda. She gave him a false memory that he'd been sick one time eating deviled eggs. And here they offer him one at the picnic on film, and you get the classic disgust wrinkle, and he said, no, I got sick one time eating them. It's not a true memory, it was planted. She's done it now with strawberries and ice cream, also done it with pickles, and has done it with alcohol. A study last year was that if you give college students the false memory that they were terribly hungover, they had a wicked hangover from drinking too much tequila, then when they're given free-range options at the bar, like a week later, they decline it at twice the rate of everybody else. They go, nah, I got sick doing that. So think about it. If you change the past, you change human behavior. We are a case-based reasoning animal. When we think about what we're going to do, we think about the last time we did something, or what we heard about, or what we think it would have done. So to change human motivation, we don't have to persuade people. You can just change their memory. And when I think about this, I think about its relevance in this day and age when you start wondering what information is real and what information is trustworthy. But in the current social media age, the ability to actually manage people's memories and change them is just enhanced compared to what it used to be. Now you can fix videos and pictures and expose people to audio and visual information, and we know that even if they know that's a possibility, people don't recognize when they adopt a false memory. It's a bit of a Trojan horse effect. You don't know that it's happened to you, and if you're smart and you have a good memory, you'll believe that happens to other people, but not you, because your memory is true. So it bypasses some critical reasoning on our part, and I think it's particularly effective. That's where the state of the art is right now for creating false memories in humans, is doing that verbally or by these manipulations with either what we say, what we show them, what we expose them to. But the chemical implanting of memories has now occurred in monkeys. So in trying to restore memory, there is probably, I would say in the next 2 years, we should see the science experiment come out that says a memory has actually been transferred or created and planted back into a human brain. That wasn't done by a classic false memory technique. But I would anticipate that that's the direction the research is going. It's probably only science fiction for another 2 years, given the state of the art and the progress around that. I didn't have any videos for it. I really wanted to show you one, but the French have published a very interesting paper, and it is this. While people were sleeping, they were able to train them and sample their knowledge in what they trained them in while they were asleep and while they were later awake and didn't know that they'd learned the information. So I'll say it again. In people who were asleep, they were able to tell what people knew around word recognition lists without ever waking the person up. They were also able to train new memory and information outside the person's awareness while they were asleep. Where that technology can go is some very interesting places.
And if we want to navigate well through our lives, we have a compass. We've been given a compass, but a compass doesn't do any good if it's in your pocket. This thing doesn't do any good for you if it's sitting on the shelf.